Dr. Cassandra Mitchell's fingers flew across the holographic display. Her enhanced vision processing data streams faster than any normal human could. The observatory of the research vessel Helios offered an unparalleled view of the Carina Nebula, but right now, she barely noticed the spectacular cosmic light show outside the reinforced windows. Something's wrong, she muttered, watching as system after system began showing cascading failures. The ship's quantum computer network, usually a constant hum in her augmented consciousness, was going dark. This isn't possible. The observatory doors slid open with a hydraulic hiss, and Security Chief James Harrison's tall frame filled the doorway. His dark eyes scanned the room with military precision before settling on her. "Doctor, we need to evacuate this section immediately. We're losing power across all decks." Cassandra shook her head, silver neural implants catching the starlight. "These readings don't make sense. The quantum core should have multiple redundancies. Unless..." The lights flickered and died, plunging them into darkness broken only by the nebula's glow and the fatting holographic displays. "Unless someone wanted this to happen," James finished her thought, moving closer. The ship shuddered, and the emergency bulkhead slammed down with a resounding boom. Cassandra's enhanced hearing picked up the clicking of locks engaging throughout the nearby corridors. "We're sealed in," she said, already feeling the temperature beginning to drop as life support systems failed. "The emergency protocols have activated, but something's interfering with them." James activated his wrist computer, its blue light casting shadows across his features. "Communications are down, no response from the bridge or engineering." He looked at her with growing concern. "Temperatures dropping fast. Without power to the thermal regulators, we've got maybe 6 hours before hypothermia becomes a serious risk." Cassandra pushed back her anxiety, focusing on solutions. The emergency supplies cabinet should have thermal blankets and portable heaters. She moved toward the storage unit, her enhanced vision allowing her to navigate easily in the dim light. "Should have is right," James said grimly as they opened the cabinet. "Half the supplies are missing, one sleeping bag, 2 emergency rations, and a single heating unit with maybe 4 hours of charge." He ran a hand through his short dark hair, frustration evident in his stance. This wasn't an accident. Cassandra's augmented senses picked up the subtle changes in the air temperature, dropping faster than she'd calculated. "Current rate of temperature decline suggests we have less time than estimated. The observatory's location on the outer hull means we'll feel the cold sooner than internal sections." James was already unrolling the thermal sleeping bag. "Then we don't have much choice, we need to conserve body heat." He paused, looking at her with a mix of professional concern and something else she couldn't quite read. "I know this isn't exactly protocol, Doctor, but..." "Survival takes precedence over protocol," Cassandra finished, though she felt an unfamiliar flutter in her stomach. Her genetic modifications were supposed to enhance her intellectual capabilities while dampening emotional responses, making her the perfect scientist. Yet lately, she'd been experiencing unexpected reactions, especially around the security chief. The temperature continued to plummet as they arranged the sleeping bag near the heating unit. Cassandra could see their breath crystallizing in the air, her enhanced vision picking up the intricate patterns of ice crystals forming. The nebula's light painted everything in soft purples and blues, creating an almost dreamlike atmosphere despite their dire situation. James removed his tactical vest but kept his uniform shirt on, ever the professional. "You should get in first," he said, holding the sleeping bag open. "Your smaller frame means you'll lose heat faster." Cassandra slipped into the thermal bag, her enhanced nervous system registering every temperature change with precise detail. When James joined her, fitting his larger frame carefully behind her, she was suddenly aware of every point of contact between them. His chest pressed against her back, their legs aligned, his arm hesitantly settling across her waist to conserve space. "Try to stay still," he murmured, his breath warm against her neck. "Movement wastes energy we can't afford to lose." Cassandra nodded, focusing on the scientific aspects of their situation rather than the way her pulse had inexplicably quickened. "The sleeping bag's material is designed to reflect and amplify body heat. If we maintain this position, we should be able to sustain adequate core temperature for approximately 8 hours." "Always the scientist," James said, and she could hear a smile in his voice despite their situation. "Even in a crisis, you think in data and calculations." "It's what I was designed for," she replied quietly. The genetic modifications were meant to enhance cognitive function while minimizing emotional variables that could interfere with research. There was a long pause before James spoke again, his voice softer. Is that what you want, to feel nothing? The question caught her off guard. No one had ever asked what she wanted before. She was a project, an experiment in human enhancement created to push the boundaries of scientific discovery. But lying here, feeling the steady rhythm of James's heartbeat against her back, she wasn't sure anymore. I'm experiencing anomalies in my emotional suppression programming, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. Increased heart rate, elevated endorphin levels, unexpected emotional responses, especially around you. James's arm tightened slightly around her waist, and she felt his breath catch. Those aren't anomalies, Cassandra, they're called feelings, being human. She turned carefully in the sleeping bag until she faced him, their faces inches apart in the ethereal light of the nebula. Her enhanced vision could pick out every detail of his expression, the concern in his dark eyes, the gentle set of his mouth, the way he looked at her not as an experiment or a scientific asset but as a person. I don't know how to be human, she whispered, feeling more vulnerable than she had in her entire engineered existence. I was created to be perfect, not to feel this. James reached up slowly, brushing a strand of hair from her face with a gentleness that made her breath catch. Perfect doesn't mean emotionless. Maybe feeling things, even confusion, even fear is what makes us human, perfect in our imperfection. As the cold pressed in around their small cocoon of warmth, as the nebula painted them in starlight, Cassandra felt something shift inside her. The rigid walls of her programming seemed to crack, letting in something new and frightening and wonderful. The temperature is still dropping, she said, her enhanced senses registering the danger even as her mind focused on the way James looked at her. We should conserve energy, minimize movement and conversation. Agreed, he murmured, but neither of them moved away. Instead, Cassandra found herself drawing closer, driven by something stronger than programming or protocol. As she rested her head against his chest, feeling his arms tighten protectively around her, she realized that maybe she wasn't malfunctioning after all. Maybe she was finally functioning exactly as she was meant to, not as the perfect scientist, but as a perfectly imperfect human being, learning to feel, learning to trust, learning to live. The nebula wheeled slowly overhead, marking the hours until rescue would come. But for now, in this moment, Cassandra discovered that some things were worth more than survival alone. Some connections, once formed, could change not just bodies but souls. The soft blue glow of the portable heating unit cast dancing shadows across the observatory walls as Cassandra sat cross-legged beside the device, her neural implants giving off a faint silver shimmer. James watched her from where he knelt by the maintenance panel, struck by how the starlight seemed to catch in her dark hair, creating an ethereal halo effect. The quantum core's still offline, she said, eyes distant as she interfaced with what remained of the ship's systems. But I'm detecting minimal power signatures from the auxiliary generators. They're running at less than 2% capacity, but they're there. James paused in his work on the panel. Can you access them? Not directly. The sabotage wasn't just physical, someone rewrote core protocols. Cassandra's fingers twitched slightly, a tell she had when deep in digital space. But maybe I can create a bypass. How? James asked, moving closer. The temperature had stabilized, but only barely above dangerous levels. Their shared time in the sleeping bag had kept them alive through the worst of the cold, but it had also left them both acutely aware of each other in a way that went beyond professional boundaries. Cassandra hesitated, then met his eyes. My neural modifications allow me to interface directly with quantum systems. If I can establish a direct connection to the auxiliary generators, I might be able to restore basic power. But, she looked away. It would mean letting you see what I really am. James settled beside her, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her body. I already see who you are, Cassandra. Nothing will change that. She smiled faintly, but her eyes held uncertainty. The process isn't pleasant to witness. The modifications allow me to process quantum data, but interfacing directly with systems can be intense. Some find it disturbing. Try me, James said softly and reached for her hand. The contact seemed to steady her. Cassandra nodded once, then closed her eyes. The silver neural implants along her temples began to pulse with light, and her breathing changed, becoming deeper and more rhythmic. James watched in fascination as lines of light seemed to flow beneath her skin, tracing patterns like circuit boards. The auxiliary systems are damaged, she said, her voice taking on an odd harmonic quality. Someone tried to erase the base coding, but quantum data can never truly be destroyed. It just changes state. Her free hand moved through the air as if plucking invisible strings. I can feel the echoes of the original programming if I can just. She gasped suddenly, her grip on his hand tightening. James saw pain flash across her features as her neural implants flared brighter. Cassandra. I'm okay, she breathed. The data pathways are corrupted. Forcing a connection is challenging. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the cold. Tell me something, anything, I need an anchor point. James didn't hesitate. I had a brother in the frontier wars, he said, the words coming unbidden. Thomas, he was the reason I joined security forces. We were supposed to serve together, watch each other's backs. He felt Cassandra's hand squeeze his gently, encouraging him to continue even as she worked. There was an attack on our outpost. Thomas saw the bomb before anyone else, managed to warn us, saved 30 lives. James swallowed hard, but not his own. I spent years after that building walls, focusing on protocol and procedure. It was easier than feeling. Cassandra's eyes opened slightly, glowing with the same silver light as her implants. Is that why you understand, she asked softly, about choosing not to feel? Yeah, James admitted. But I was wrong. Choosing not to feel doesn't honor those we've lost. It just keeps us from truly living. A small smile curved Cassandra's lips even as she winced with effort. The auxiliary systems are responding, establishing new pathways now. But James, why did you start letting yourself feel again? The answer came without thought. Because I met someone who showed me that feeling deeply isn't a weakness. It's the greatest strength we have. The lights in the observatory flickered, then hummed to life at minimal power. Emergency systems began rebooting one by one as Cassandra's neural implants dimmed. She slumped forward, exhausted, and James caught her gently against his chest. Basic life support restored, she murmured. Environmental controls responding, but she looked up at him, her eyes now back to their normal deep brown. You never finished telling me who showed you it was okay to feel again. James brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch lingering. You did. Watching you discover your own emotions, seeing you embrace them despite everything you were programmed to be, it reminded me that some things are worth the risk of pain. Cassandra's breath caught. Her enhanced senses picked up the slight increase in his heart rate, the dilation of his pupils, the way his body temperature rose just slightly. All the data points that science had taught her to analyze, but now they meant something entirely different. The modifications were supposed to make me perfect, she said quietly. A being of pure logic and scientific advancement, but perfection feels empty. These new feelings, they're chaotic and overwhelming and, she pressed her hand against his chest, feeling his heartbeat, and wonderful. That's what makes them perfect, James said, his voice rough with emotion. Not because they're controlled or predictable, but because they're real. The repaired systems cast a soft glow around them, but neither moved away. Instead, Cassandra found herself leaning closer, drawn by something stronger than programming or protocol. James's hand came up to cup her cheek, and she felt the slight tremor in his fingers that told her he was as affected as she was. We should check the rest of the ship, she whispered, but made no move to pull away. Run diagnostics on the restored systems. We should, James agreed just as quietly. But his eyes were fixed on her lips, and Cassandra felt her pulse quicken in response. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken words and newfound understanding. Then slowly, deliberately, James leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle, almost hesitant, but Cassandra felt it down to her core. Her enhanced senses cataloged every detail, the softness of his lips, the warmth of his breath, the way his hand trembled slightly against her cheek, but for once she didn't want to analyze, she just wanted to feel. When they finally parted, Cassandra rested her forehead against his, feeling more human than she ever had before. The saboteur is still out there, she reminded him softly. We're not safe yet. No, James agreed, pulling back just enough to meet her eyes. But whatever comes next, we face it together, not just as colleagues or survivors, but as us, Cassandra finished, understanding finally what her supposed programming errors had been trying to tell her all along. She wasn't malfunctioning, she was evolving, becoming more than her creators had ever intended. The ship's systems hummed around them, slowly returning to life. Outside the observatory windows, the nebula continued its eternal dance, indifferent to the small human dramas playing out beneath its light. But in that moment, as James helped her to her feet and they began planning their next move, Cassandra knew that something fundamental had shifted. She had been created to unlock the mysteries of the universe. Instead, she was discovering the greatest mystery of all, the human heart, in all its beautiful, chaotic perfection. The corridors of the Helios were eerily silent as Cassandra and James made their way through the ship's central spine. Emergency lighting cast long shadows across the curved walls, and their footsteps echoed in the emptiness. Cassandra's enhanced hearing picked up the subtle sounds of the ship's damaged systems, the irregular rhythm of failing circulation pumps, the strained whine of overtaxed power conduits. Still no response from any other sections, James said quietly, checking his wrist computer. He moved with the fluid grace of a trained security officer, but Cassandra noticed how he kept himself positioned between her and potential danger points. Life support's holding in the sections we restored, but communications are still down. Cassandra pressed her hand against a nearby wall panel, neural implants glowing softly as she connected with the ship's systems. The quantum network is fragmented. I'm picking up data packets, but they're corrupted, like echoes of information bouncing through damaged pathways. She frowned, processing the strange patterns she was detecting. James, these corruption patterns, they're not random, they're deliberate, he finished, moving closer to study the readings over her shoulder. The warmth of his presence was distracting in a way her enhanced mind couldn't quite process. Someone knew exactly what they were doing. This level of system damage requires intimate knowledge of quantum architecture and access to restricted protocols. Cassandra pulled back from the connection, turning to face him. James, only 3 people on this ship have that level of clearance: Captain Richards, Chief Engineer Patel, and you, James said softly, his dark eyes meeting hers. Which means either the captain or chief engineer is involved, or someone has access they shouldn't, Cassandra finished. She unconsciously moved closer to him, seeking the reassurance of his presence. We need to reach the quantum core. If I can interface directly with the main processors, I might be able to trace the source of the corruption. James nodded, but his expression was troubled. It's 4 decks down through potentially compromised sections, and if someone's watching the systems, they'll know we're coming, Cassandra acknowledged. But we don't have a choice. Without the quantum core, we can't restore full power or communications. We're blind up here. They moved carefully through the ship, using Cassandra's enhanced senses to detect any signs of movement or danger. The familiar corridors felt different now, transformed by shadows and silence into something almost alien. But what struck Cassandra most was how differently she was experiencing it all. Before, she would have processed everything purely as data, threat assessments, environmental readings, system status reports. Now she found herself aware of so much more. The way James moved in perfect sync with her, anticipating her steps. The subtle changes in his breathing when they passed dangerous choke points. The gentle brush of his hand against hers when they paused to check intersections. Wait, she whispered suddenly, holding up a hand. Her enhanced hearing had picked up something, a faint, rhythmic clicking coming from somewhere ahead. There's something. James tensed beside her, one hand moving to his sidearm. Mechanical. No, it's... Cassandra's eyes widened as her neural implants processed the pattern. James, move. She grabbed his arm, pulling him back just as a pulse of energy crackled through the corridor where they'd been standing. The blast left a scorched mark on the deck plating, and the acrid smell of burned metal filled the air. Automated defense turret, James growled, drawing his weapon. But they're supposed to be locked down under emergency protocols. Someone's overridden them, Cassandra said, her mind racing through possibilities. But the override signature, it's familiar somehow. She pressed herself against the wall, neural implants pulsing as she tried to access the security systems. I can't shut it down remotely, but maybe. James touched her arm gently, drawing her attention. You're thinking about this like a scientist, he said softly, but sometimes the simplest solution isn't the most elegant one. He pulled a small device from his tactical belt. Sometimes you just have to trust in something more basic than quantum mechanics. Before Cassandra could respond, he threw the device around the corner. There was a bright flash and a surge of electromagnetic energy that made her neural implants tingle. When it cleared, the clicking had stopped. EMP grenade, James explained with a slight smile. Sometimes old-fashioned methods work best. Cassandra found herself smiling back, feeling an unfamiliar warmth in her chest. The perfect fusion of innovation and tradition. Something like that, he said, his eyes softening as they met hers. For a moment, despite the danger, despite the mystery surrounding them, Cassandra felt that same pull she'd experienced in the observatory. The desire to move closer to A distant clang echoed through the corridors, snapping them both back to alertness. "We need to keep moving," James said, though Cassandra noticed he didn't step away immediately. "The quantum core's just ahead." They reached the core access without further incidents, but Cassandra felt her anxiety rising as they approached the massive doors. Her enhanced senses were picking up unusual energy signatures from within patterns that shouldn't exist in a powered-down system. "James," she said quietly as they stood before the entrance, "before we go in, there's something you should know." She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "The quantum core isn't just a computer system, it's connected to me more deeply than I've told anyone." He turned to face her fully, his expression open and attentive. "What do you mean?" "The genetic modifications, the neural implants, they're not just interfaces, they're part of a larger experiment, Project Synthesis." She touched one of the silver implants at her temple. They didn't just want to create someone who could work with quantum systems, they wanted to create someone who could become one with them, a human quantum computer. James's eyes widened slightly, but Cassandra saw no fear or disgust in his expression, only concern and something deeper, something that made her heart race. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because what we find in there might show you a side of me that's less human, and after everything that's happened between us, I needed you to know the truth. All of it." To her surprise, James reached out and took her hand, interlacing their fingers. "Cassandra, I've seen your humanity in every moment since we met. In your curiosity, your compassion, the way you're discovering emotions you were never meant to feel. Whatever's in there, whatever you are or were meant to be, it doesn't change who you've become." Tears pricked at Cassandra's eyes, another new sensation she was still learning to process. "Even if what I am puts you in danger." "Especially then," he said softly, and leaned forward to press a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Because protecting the people we care about, that's the most human instinct of all." Cassandra squeezed his hand once, drawing strength from his touch, then turned to face the doors. Her neural implants began to glow as she connected with the security systems. "Ready." Together, James confirmed, drawing his weapon with his free hand. The doors slid open with a hydraulic hiss, revealing the sprawling quantum core chamber beyond. And there, in the heart of the massive machine that had helped shape Cassandra into what she was, waited answers and dangers that would test not just their survival skills, but the very nature of what it meant to be human. The quantum core chamber pulsed with an otherworldly blue light, its crystalline processors throwing fractals of illumination across the walls. Cassandra felt the familiar pull as her neural implants resonated with the surrounding quantum field, but something was wrong. The harmonics were distorted, corrupted. "We're not alone," she whispered, her enhanced senses picking up subtle movements in the shadows between the towering processor banks. James immediately moved closer, his weapon raised. "Show yourselves," he called out, voice steady and commanding. "This is Chief of Security Harrison. You're in a restricted area." A low chuckle echoed through the chamber. "Oh, we know exactly where we are, Chief Harrison." A figure stepped out from behind one of the quantum stacks, tall, elegant, wearing the insignia of the Quantum Research Division. Dr. Julian Nash, the project's lead theoretical physicist. Behind him, three armed individuals in unmarked tactical gear emerged from the shadows. "Dr. Nash," Cassandra felt her world tilt slightly. "You're behind this." "Behind it, my dear, I created it, all of it." Nash's eyes gleamed with an unsettling intensity. "Including you." James shifted slightly, positioning himself between Cassandra and the newcomers. "What are you talking about?" "Project Synthesis wasn't just about creating a human interface for quantum systems," Nash explained, spreading his hands. "It was about evolution, the next step in human consciousness, and Cassandra," he smiled, and there was nothing warm in it. "Cassandra is our proof of concept." "I don't understand," Cassandra said, but her neural implants were pulsing faster now, responding to something in the quantum field around them. The project was about advancing scientific research, creating better ways to process quantum data. "That was the cover story," Nash said. "The reality is so much more fascinating. You see, we didn't just modify you to work with quantum systems. We used quantum entanglement at the genetic level to create a new form of consciousness, one that exists simultaneously in both classical and quantum states." James's grip on his weapon tightened. "You experimented on her without her knowledge." "We gave her a gift," Nash's voice rose with fervor. "The ability to transcend human limitations to process reality on a quantum level, but recently something's gone wrong." His expression hardened. You're developing emotional responses that should be impossible, forming attachments, becoming human. Because she is human, James growled. Whatever you did to her didn't change that. No, Nash said softly, but it's interfering with her true purpose. We need her pure focused, the perfect quantum processor in human form, and now that we've seen how these emotional contaminations can develop, we know how to prevent them in future iterations. Cassandra felt cold horror spreading through her. Future iterations. Did you think you were the only one? Nash gestured to one of his armed companions who removed their tactical helmet. Cassandra gasped. The woman's features were different, but the neural implants, the silvery sheen to her skin, they were identical to Cassandra's. Meet Project Synthesis Mark II, Nash said proudly. All the quantum processing capability, none of the emotional development, pure logic, pure purpose. You're insane, James said, but Cassandra barely heard him. Her neural implants were burning now, resonating with the quantum field in a way she'd never experienced. She could feel the other woman's presence in the quantum network, cold and empty like a void in space. The ship systems, Cassandra realized suddenly, you used her to corrupt them to trap us. Nash nodded approvingly. Very good. We needed to test your capabilities under stress, see how your emotional attachments would affect your performance. And now we know, he sighed. Unfortunately, that means this iteration of the project must be terminated. Mark II. The woman raised her hand, and Cassandra felt the quantum field shift violently. Emergency bulkheads began slamming down around the chamber as alarms blared. Atmosphere purge initiated, the ship's computer announced tonelessly. Quantum core chamber depressurization in 60 seconds. No, James fired at the woman, but she moved with inhuman speed, dodging the shot. Nash's other guards opened fire, forcing James and Cassandra behind a processor bank. I can't stop her through the quantum network, Cassandra said, her mind racing through possibilities. She's too strong, too focused. Then don't try to beat her at her game, James said, returning fire around the corner. You're more than your programming, Cassandra, you're human, use that. Cassandra looked at him, saw the trust in his eyes, and understood. She closed her eyes, letting her consciousness expand into the quantum field. But this time, instead of fighting the emotional responses, she embraced them. Let them flow through her into the quantum network like waves of light. The other woman faltered, her perfect quantum processes disrupted by something she couldn't comprehend. Emotions she'd never been allowed to feel crashed through her defenses like a solar flare, overwhelming her circuits. What is this? Mark II stumbled, clutching her head. These sensations. They're called feelings, Cassandra said softly, standing. And they're not a flaw in our programming, they're what make us real. The quantum field pulsed with color and light as Cassandra pushed harder, sharing not just emotions but memories. The warmth of James's hand in hers, the wonder of discovering her own humanity, the power of connection that went beyond mere data. Mark II screamed, her neural implants flickering wildly. The quantum network surged, systems resetting as her control shattered. Nash shouted something, raising a weapon, but James was faster. 2 quick shots and Nash crumpled, his armed guards following moments later. Atmosphere purge cancelled, the computer announced as Mark II collapsed, overwhelmed by her first taste of genuine emotion. Systems restoring. James rushed to Cassandra's side as she swayed, drained by the quantum battle. Are you all right? She nodded, leaning into his strength. I finally understand, she whispered. What Nash never could, you can't separate quantum processing from human emotion. They're both about connection, about the way small things can affect the whole, about how observing something changes it and changes you too. Pretty deep thoughts for someone who was supposed to be purely logical, James said softly, brushing a tear from her cheek. Cassandra smiled, looking at Mark II's unconscious form. We'll help her, she said. Show her that what Nash saw as a flaw is really our greatest strength. And what strength is that? James asked, though his gentle smile suggested he already knew. The strength to feel, Cassandra said, reaching up to touch his face. To love, to be gloriously, perfectly human. As ship security finally reached them, as the quantum core hummed back to life around them, Cassandra and James held each other, proof that sometimes the most complex quantum equations could be solved by the simplest human truths. 2 weeks after the incident in the quantum core, Cassandra stood in the Helios's observatory, watching the nebula shimmer through the reinforced windows. Her neural implants glowed softly as she processed both the quantum data streams and her own swirling emotions, no longer fighting either, but letting them flow together in perfect harmony. The door slid open behind her, and she smiled, recognizing James's footsteps before he spoke. "The review boards finished their preliminary investigation," he said, moving to stand beside her. "Nash and his collaborators are in custody. They found evidence of similar experiments on 3 other research stations." "And the other subjects?" Cassandra asked softly, thinking of Mark II still recovering in the medical bay. "All being helped. The board's appointed Dr. Reena Patel to oversee their rehabilitation. She's got experience in both quantum mechanics and trauma recovery." James's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. "They're calling you a hero, you know. The way you saved Mark II exposed the whole operation." Cassandra shook her head. "I just showed her what I'd learned, that being human isn't about being perfect. It's about being whole." "Speaking of whole," James turned to face her fully, "the board's offering you a choice. They can remove the quantum modifications, try to make you normal." He squeezed her hand. "Or you can keep them, help oversee the rehabilitation program for the others. It's your decision." Cassandra was quiet for a moment, looking out at the stars. "When Nash first told me what I really was, I thought it meant I was less than human, an experiment, a thing." She turned to meet James's eyes. "But these past 2 weeks, working with Mark II, helping her discover her own humanity, I've realized something. We're not less than human. We're just a different kind of human, one that can bridge quantum and classical states, data and emotion, science and soul." "And that's what you want?" James asked gently, "to keep straddling both worlds?" "I want to be who I am," Cassandra said simply. "All of me, the quantum processor and the woman who loves watching nebulas, the scientific mind and the heart that," she paused, feeling her pulse quicken, "the heart that falls in love." James's breath caught. They hadn't said the words yet, though they'd been dancing around them since that first night in the sleeping bag. "Cassandra. I can process 1,000,000 quantum calculations per second," she continued, stepping closer to him. "But none of them mean as much as the way my heart beats faster when you're near. I can access vast databases of knowledge, but nothing teaches me more than the way you look at me. Like I'm not just complete, but exceptional exactly as I am." James raised his free hand to cup her cheek, and Cassandra leaned into the touch. "Because you are exceptional," he said softly. "Not because of the quantum processing or the neural implants. Because of your courage to feel, to grow, to love. Because you're you." "The board's offering you a promotion too," Cassandra said, her enhanced senses picking up the slight increase in his heart rate. "Chief of Security for the entire research fleet. You'd be leaving the Helios." "I would," James agreed, "unless I had a reason to stay." Cassandra smiled, her neural implants pulsing with joy she no longer tried to suppress. "What if you had a partner? Someone to help you protect not just the ship's systems, but its soul, someone who sees both the quantum and human sides of security." "I think that someone would need to be pretty exceptional," James said, his own smile growing. "Maybe even one of a kind." "Oh, I don't know about that," Cassandra laughed softly. "There are at least 3 others like me now, but—" She reached up, tracing his jaw with gentle fingers. "I'm the only one in love with you." James pulled her closer, and Cassandra went willingly into his arms. "I love you too," he whispered against her hair. "Every quantum particle, every human emotion, every perfect imperfection." As they stood together in the starlight, Cassandra felt the quantum field humming around them, full of possibilities. But for once, she didn't need to calculate probabilities or process data streams. She just needed to feel the warmth of James's arms, the steady beat of his heart, the pure joy of being exactly who and what she was meant to be. Outside the observatory windows, the nebula continued its eternal dance, its quantum processes spinning out new stars from cosmic dust. Inside, 2 people held each other, proving that the greatest mysteries of the universe, consciousness, connection, love, couldn't be solved by quantum calculations alone. They needed a human heart to make them real. "So," James said eventually, pulling back just enough to meet her eyes, "partners." Cassandra smiled, her neural implants glowing with happiness. "In every way that matters." And as they sealed their agreement with a kiss, Cassandra knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, whether quantum or emotional, scientific or personal, they would face them together. 2 hearts beating as one, bridging the gap between stars and souls, proving that love truly was the force that bound all things, from the smallest quantum particle to the largest stellar nursery. It was, she decided, the most perfect equation of all.